One of the things Cardano has been very good at so far is not picking the wrong battles. Specifically, I mean, not picking battles where you could be easily defeated. And even if you win, the spoils of victory are not that fantastic. Cardano has been silently waging its own battles in the background, where things like decentralization and security are the prizes to be won. But today, one of the only SEC regulated entities in crypto launched something that could start a battle that determines how scaling is really going to happen in crypto. Ready? Let's go. Today, we're going to discuss the unveiling of the Coinbase Blue Ball mystery project and how it might be the perfect excuse for Gary Gensler to launch the war he's been dying to wage, the departure of one of Cardano's most beloved characters, the demise of Cardano's first stablecoin, and a huge milestone approaching for ADA handle. If you think there may be some exaggeration here regarding the size and physique of Gary Gensler versus Brian Armstrong, or if you're finding value in these videos each weekday, please consider delegating to the Army of Spies stake pool, ticker AOS. So today we found out all about the Coinbase Blue Ball mystery project. Before that, all we knew was that they had something coming today and it had something to do with a blue ball. It turns out it is called Base, and it is an optimistic roll-up layer 2 solution for Ethereum. This is a scaling solution for Ethereum that has been incubated by Coinbase. Incubated is probably the verb that Coinbase wants us to use, and it's the verb they used in their announcement of this project. But really, we can just say built by Coinbase. So here's the post on the actual Base Twitter profile. It says, "We have a vision of scaling Ethereum with a super chain." Are you ready for people to throw on the super chain terminology? Base is an Ethereum L2 that offers a secure, low-cost, developer-friendly way for anyone, anywhere to build decentralized apps. They say, "We're doing this by building on the open source OP stack in collaboration with Optimism to create a super chain that collectively scales Ethereum." It's important to understand what Coinbase has planned for this Base L2. And they kind of lay it out for you right here in this video. They say, for the next billion users. So their idea is that this scaling solution is so that they can onboard the next billion crypto users. And they do have a pretty catchy slogan: all your base are belong to you. You will understand that meme if you've been on the internet for a certain amount of time at least. So more importantly though, if we skip ahead here, they say build lending on Base. This is interesting. So they're already talking about DeFi. They're talking about building DeFi on Base. Build lending, build DEXs, build NFTs, build stable coins on Base. I mean, they're hitting some things that are going to interest Gary Gensler. Gary Gensler, of course, is very interested in stable coins, specifically in suppressing them. It seems to me suppressing stable coins is a part of his job description. I think, at least in his mind, this is something he'll be very interested in. Oh, you're gonna create an Ethereum layer 2 scaling solution so that people can more effectively build stable coins. You also want them to build DEXs, which he probably believes are just unregistered securities exchanges, and also lending platforms, which he also probably believes are trafficking in unregistered securities. So there are a lot of things here that Gary Gensler will be interested in. But first, we should talk about what exactly is an optimistic roll-up L2. Well, if we go to ethereum.org, they've got a whole page on optimistic rollups. And I know you're thinking already, hey, I see the dark mode button up there. You always go to dark mode. Why aren't you in dark mode? Here's why. In Ethereum world, dark mode is also Halloween mode. And while that may be appropriate at a different time of year, this is one case where I'm going to stick with light mode. I'm very, very much prefer dark mode, but not so much Halloween mode. So we're going to stick with light mode today here. They let us know a few things right up front that we kind of already know. Optimistic rollups are layer 2 protocols designed to extend the throughput of Ethereum's base layer. We know that. An optimistic rollup is an approach to scaling Ethereum that involves moving computation and state storage off chain. If you pay attention to blockchain stuff, crypto stuff, you're probably aware that's the whole goal of L2s generally. And then they start telling you exactly what an optimistic rollup is. They say optimistic rollup operators bundle multiple off-chain transactions together in large batches before submitting to Ethereum. So they bundle together all these transactions happening on the L2 in a large batch and then submit that to Ethereum. So they say optimistic rollups are considered optimistic, and here's where they're gonna distinguish optimistic rollups from ZK rollups, zero knowledge rollups. They say they're considered optimistic because they assume off-chain transactions are valid and don't publish proofs of validity for transaction batches posted on chain. This separates optimistic rollups from zero knowledge rollups that publish cryptographic proofs of validity for off-chain transactions. Optimistic rollups instead rely on a fraud proving scheme to detect cases where transactions are not calculated correctly. After a rollup batch is submitted on Ethereum, there's a time window called the challenge period, during which anyone can challenge the results of a rollup transaction by computing a fraud proof. If the fraud proof succeeds, the rollup protocol re-executes the transactions and updates the rollup state accordingly. So you already understand why these are called optimistic rollups. They're being optimistic about the veracity of the transactions. And they have to go through this period of time, this window of time, where there could be a challenge to the veracity of those transactions. And someone could compute this fraud proof or something else to sort of disprove the veracity of those transactions. And then they can sort of go back and correct these fraudulent transactions. But you can see this is very different than a ZK rollup, a zero knowledge rollup, where you actually have the publishing of a cryptographic proof of validity. There's a cryptographic proving of the veracity and validity of those transactions. That's not the case in an optimistic rollup. They're like, we're just gonna be optimistic that that the sequencers aren't lying about the transaction. And then if they are lying, like somebody can come along and say, hey, they're lying and prove it, and then we'll fix it. So you can tell already this doesn't sound optimal to me. When I hear this, I'm like, maybe that works, but it doesn't really sound optimal. So if we go to Coinbase's blog about this, Base's blog, I guess when we're referring to this project, we have to call them Base. I'm sure that was fully connected in their minds with people perceiving them as being based. But we have to go to Base's blog here, where they talk all about decentralization. You go through this blog and they're advancing the crypto economy. It's a super chain guided by decentralization. And then we come down here to the roadmap. And the roadmap, to me, is often where a lot of the marketing magic breaks down with projects of all types, crypto and non-crypto. They love to say whatever are the most popular positive buzz terms, and then you get to their roadmap and you see what's actually happening. And oftentimes it sort of pales in comparison to what was implied by those buzz terms. Here they say, in 2023, we will work towards progressing base, because they're so based, even progressing their basedness, progressing base and optimism mainnet from a stage 0 rollup as defined by Vitalik to a stage 1 rollup with a significant level of decentralization and trustlessness. This is something we often contrast with the way things work in Cardano. In Cardano, we're moving toward on-chain governance. And in Ethereum, what you see Lord Vitamin defining the stages of rollups and what rollup should be. And this is a good example of Lord Vitamin kind of sending down his decrees from up on high. So we should see if this is the metric, though, if even Coinbase is following the law as foretold by Lord Vitamin, we should actually go and see what he says. So they say they're going to go from a stage 0 rollup to a stage 1 rollup. in 2023. And then they throw in the buzz terms decentralization and trustlessness. But let's see, what are stage 0 and stage 1 according to Lord Vitamin? When we follow the link provided by Coinbase in their blog entry, we come to this forum. Welcome to the Ethereum Magicians Forum. And here is the post from the Lord himself. They say there are currently a large number of there are currently a large number of optimistic and ZK rollup projects at various stages of development. One pattern that is common to almost all of them is the use of temporary training wheels. And notice this is just from November 22. So this isn't really old thinking. This is just from a few months ago. So temporary training wheels. When I hear that, I know that all the rhetoric is about to break down. When people start talking about training wheels, you know what they're going to say. They're going to say, hey, I know we use those buzz terms and eventually we get there. But training wheels at the start, and they're not actually delivering, at least in the beginning, what those buzz terms imply. Maybe down the road, but in crypto, down the road could be a really long time down the road, especially when there's money to be made before that. So as we come down here, we're going to find out about the training wheels in stage 0 and stage 1. And remember, they said they were going to go from stage 0 to stage 1 in 2023. So what exactly is stage 0? Remembering that they were talking all about trustlessness and decentralization. That's what this is all about, trustlessness and decentralization. So they say, he describes how it should work. There should exist a roll-up full node, an independently runnable software package that can read the L1 chain, extract to the rollup chain and compute the current state of the rollup chain. If it disagrees with the rollup state root posted in the contract, it should give an alarm. Okay. There should be machinery that allows users to either post rollup transactions or at least ensure withdrawal of their assets with no cooperation from the operator. That is, the operator cannot freeze or steal users' assets by censoring users. Okay, that's good, right? We want that. I think anybody in Ethereum isn't going to want the operator of the rollup node to be able, or the rollup contract at least, to be able to steal the user's assets or freeze them. That's okay. But down here in this last bullet point, it says it's okay if the on-chain mechanism for posting new state roots is simply a multi-sig with no active fraud proof or validity proof whatsoever. So get that. The Lord on high, which Coinbase, the based Coinbase, is telling us they are ascribing to here, he says it's okay if the on-chain mechanism is just multi-sig, just a few different private keys signing, multi-sig, plural, but who knows how many, maybe just a few, with no active fraud proof or validity proof whatsoever. So it's possible there is no challenging of whatever the operator says is the state of the rollup L2. There is no challenging of that because we have no active fraud proof or validity proof whatsoever. So what we're talking about here is really just an L2 run by an operator, and at stage 0, it's just kind of a centralized layer on top of the blockchain that sort of reports back and forth to the main chain. So there is no decentralization, and because we're just trusting the operator at stage 0, there is no trustlessness. Certainly, so they said they're going to get to stage 1 in 2023. Certainly stage 1 must be much better. And they do say there must be a running fraud proof or validity proof scheme, which has the practical authority to accept or reject which state roots get accepted by the rollup contract. Okay, it's better. There can exist a multi-sig based override mechanism, a security council. So now we've gotten to the point where we have a fraud proof or validity proofing scheme, but there's also going to be this multi-sig security council. So we're actually right back to this oligarchy thing. We're right back to this system of, a small group of people actually eventually being in charge. If everything, if certain things happen, the ultimate authority here is the Security Council, which, we don't know how many are going to be on the Security Council, except that we do in the very next bullet point. They say the multi-sig must be 6 of 8 or stricter. So the Lord on high is telling them it's okay if the multi-sig is just 8 people. If you're like Coinbase, maybe you just have 8 people and 6 out of the 8 need to sign. Maybe that's what it is. Who knows? I'm sure Coinbase will make some attempt to make this look like some kind of consortium. Maybe they'll have a couple people from, Optimism or something like that and some Coinbase people. But, it looks to me like we're looking at 8 people. And if 6 of them sign the multi-sig, that's it. This is not the kind of decentralization I signed up for. They say at least a quorum blocking group, that is enough participants to prevent the multisig from acting, must be outside the organization that is running the rollup. Okay, so there we go. This is interesting. So here we go. So the dictate from the Lord is that there must be, at least 3 people from outside Coinbase. So it's better than nothing. They say there can exist an upgrade mechanism, but it has a lower threshold than the multi-sig. Upgrades must have a mandatory activation delay of at least 7 days or the maximum length of the fraud-proof game, whichever is longer. So the threshold for the upgrade is lower than the multi-sig, so Coinbase could just upgrade it whenever they want to because the threshold's going to be lower than multi-sig, so it's like the threshold for upgrade might be like, might only be like 4 of 8 or something that, and Coinbase will have probably whatever that number is. They'll have like 5 of 8 so that they have to get at least 1 vote from the outsiders. So this is as far as they said they're going to go in 2023. It just says they're going to go from stage 0 to stage 1. So at no point here do we move beyond at least the Security Council. As decentralized as this is going to get in stage 0 or stage 1 is a Security Council is running everything. In stage 0, the operator, Coinbase, pretty much just gets to do whatever it wants, and there's not even an active fraud proof or validity proof. In stage 1 that they're hoping to get to in this year in 2023, there's a Security Council, but it looks like we're still talking about 8 people here running the entire L2 that they're hoping is going to allow them to onboard the next billion people. So let's see what stage. They don't even talk about stage 2 in their article. At least we can check, but I don't think they do. They say in the event that code does not have bugs in stage 2, there must not be any group of actors that can even unanimously post a state root other than output of the code. That sounds good. The rollup uses 2 or more independent implementations of its state transition function. Okay. If someone submits a transaction or series of transactions that contain 2 valid proofs for 2 distinct state roots, after processing the same data, control temporarily turns over to the Security Council. Oh, okay. And even in stage 2, which I think Coinbase is not even saying they're going to get to, there are these situations where control still temporarily turns over to the Security Council. If no valid proof is submitted for greater than or equal to 7 days, the prover is stuck. Control temporarily also turns over to the Security Council. So even in this stage that Coinbase is not even saying they're going to get to, we're still relying on the Security Council. This sounds nothing like the decentralization or trustlessness that Satoshi was after, that pretty much anybody in crypto who was kind of sticking to the ethos of crypto signed up for. I don't think any of us would have signed up if the Satoshi white paper had said, oh, by the way, there's going to be a Bitcoin Security Council, and if anything bad happens, they just kind of take over temporarily. You guys cool with that? We'll still call it decentralization and trustlessness, but at the end of the day, you're actually trusting them. And by the way, eventually this will be the biggest company in all of North American crypto. You still feel good about that? Okay, to be fair, looking back here at their roadmap, later on in the roadmap, they do say in 2024, we will work toward progressing Base and Optimism mainnet to stage 2 rollups with levels of decentralization and security comparable to Ethereum. We have an ambitious roadmap, but believe our embodiment of the Web3 ethos of collaboration will get us there. But they don't tell you, hey, by the way, even in stage 2, there's still this thing called a Security Council that can temporarily take over the whole thing. You guys are still cool with us calling that decentralization and trustlessness, right? They don't put that in there because that doesn't sound good. Of course, crypto law Twitter has already taken note of the centralization that seems to be inherent in Base, and they're they've got some conclusions they think they can make based on that, some predictions for the future of Coinbase that may not be so great because of what they're doing right now. So this post says, many people seeing some kind of regulatory strategy in Coinbase's L2. No idea if that is Coinbase's primary motivation or not, but if so, in my opinion, it is a massive miscalculation. Let me explain. Base is a stage 0 optimistic rollup, aka centralized, aka essentially a glorified enterprise blockchain that could become decentralized in the future. So, and you can see he's quoting his own post here that says, I wonder if the SEC is currently researching what stage 0 means and thinking of broker dealer issues. Coinbase hasn't added a token to it. Instead, they're using ETH, which provides some regulatory cover. SEC could claim any new token as a security, but in my opinion, it's not enough. Keep in mind, Coinbase is the only significant SEC-registered company in crypto. This very anti-crypto SEC is likely watching every move Coinbase makes, looking for vulnerabilities. And we remember this from the Coinbase Earn misadventure. Coinbase was going to have a product. It seemed like they were going to have a product that would look a lot like the things going on like BlockFi. And the SEC jumped down their throat, and Coinbase did not launch that product, at least not the way they wanted to. So we already know the SEC is watching Coinbase very, very carefully. And the pattern so far has been that if there's something going on in crypto that the SEC doesn't like, and a centralized entity does it, the SEC will not hesitate to jump on them. We've seen this with Kraken. We've seen this with stable coins. They don't like certain things about staking. They don't like certain things about stable coins. So if a centralized entity does those things, they're going to jump right on. Why? Because the SEC knows how to sue centralized entities. It's new territory for them to sue decentralized entities. I think they're already sort of laying out the roadmap for that. Federal regulators in general are, with cases like the CFTC case with UkiDAO. But for now, they're just going after entities that they're already good at suing, and they're real good at suing centralized entities. They're even better at going after entities who are already registered with them. Don't forget, Coinbase is an SEC registered company. It's a public company. They have to file reports with the SEC every quarter, every year. They file reports based on certain other events taking place. They're an SEC registered company. The SEC is real good at dealing with SEC registered companies who do things that they don't like. The post continues, a centralized L2 that trades lots of tokens, any number of which could be alleged securities, or does lots of DeFi transactions that arguably might be alleged to be regulated, security swaps, and etc., opens the door to the SEC making new kinds of secondary market claims. Consider that the SEC has already proposed to change the definition of securities exchange to cover communications protocols, and the fact that this L2 will essentially just be a messaging protocol, you get some rough intuitive sense of the danger here. It's one thing for the SEC to let optimism at all sit on the back burner for a while. The SEC waits to see how big they get and racks up wins against token issuers. It's quite another matter for the SEC to let Coinbase, an SEC registrant, do the same. In my opinion, this will accelerate the SEC's secondary market agenda regarding blockchain securities issues, because they can't let an SEC registrant get away with potential violations and build up a legal arbitrage strategy right under the SEC's nose. Many L2s have centralized aspects, and the teams running core infra will have a hard time defending allegations that they're functioning as broker-dealers or in facilitation roles regarding market transactions that may involve securities. Overall, if indeed Coinbase's motives are regulatory in nature, it's not only a bad step for them, but could threaten dangerous collateral damage to the rest of the ecosystem. If their motives are regulatory, they should have waited till all the infrastructure can be really decentralized. I think this is a very good point. Coinbase is our only large SEC registered crypto company. And we know the SEC is watching them very carefully. And the SEC is not afraid to go after centralized companies. And they're definitely not afraid to go after centralized companies who are already under their jurisdiction, who are already registered with them. So this could be one of those things. I'm sure from Coinbase's perspective, they were thinking, hey, we'll just go ahead and launch this thing because, it already exists. We already have optimistic rollups, no big deal. We'll just do an optimistic roll up, and this will be how we onboard the next billion customers. SEC, I think they see this. They might look at this very, very differently than Coinbase does. And if they go after Coinbase for this, who says they don't turn around and say, wait a second, I mean, Coinbase is very centralized, but the way they're running this centralized optimistic rollup is exactly the same way a lot of other groups in crypto are running these centralized components of these optimistic rollups. Maybe we just go after all of them, or maybe some case law that comes out of them going after Coinbase. Maybe you just can't make a good argument that it doesn't apply to the rest of them, and then it just has this chilling effect on optimistic rollups across the crypto space. That could be. It would be very easy to imagine that being the eventual outcome of all this. I would feel remiss in my duties if I didn't highlight this. It looks like we have lost Cardano well again. So this has happened before. He's left before, and it turned out to be temporary. Let's all keep our fingers crossed that this time is also temporary. But I think he made his feelings on the whole contingent staking debate and permissionlessness and what might come out of all this very clear. So who knows? This time could be different. But I'm still very optimistic, no pun intended, that we see him again. Here's some more unfortunate news. Shareslake, which is the project behind the actual first stablecoin in Cardano, RUSD, has decided to call it quits. They say after a hard year and 4 months bootstrapping Shareslake, today we are forced to communicate the hard decision to halt the project. The main reasons are the lack of interest from users and the lack of funds to continue. Shareslake was a self-funded project. During this time, we brought the first stablecoin to Cardano, its corresponding mint dashboard, a whole network running as a sidechain, powered by the stablecoin, and a bridge to move assets between the chains. Despite that, we never managed to gain traction. At this moment, there are 31 accounts holding the stablecoin in the Cardano mainnet and less than 10 in the sidechain. We tried everything in our hands to make this a viable project. During the past 6 months, we contacted several VCs/investors to continue our way, but the lack of traction, among other things, has made it impossible to get funded. Coming back to our mistakes, this kind of project requires high initial liquidity bootstrapping from day one. Our plan was to demonstrate we were able to build it and then find the liquidity. We tried to raise funds from several VCs, including those that are focused on Cardano. We were rejected by all of them. The main reason for rejection in most cases was the team. There are investors out there putting millions into projects that don't ever deliver while rejecting those that already did. We also tried to run an SPO. It didn't work. They only got 120,000 ADA in stake. They want to share some information about their metrics. They say the stablecoin has been available to be minted since September. Since then, we got just 230 users registered on the dashboard, and only 3 of them really minted RUSD with a total amount of $500 minted. Here's where it gets interesting. Nevertheless, there were more than 11,000 in redemptions coming from unpegged states indexes that people took advantage of and were funded by us. So it sounds like even though only $500 worth of RUSD was ever minted, it sounds like they covered the $11,000 worth of redemptions due to unpegged states indexes. That's obviously not optimal. Doesn't sound very optimal to me. More people used RUSD to make profits from special situations than to go into the ecosystem, making it impossible to ever grow the liquidity and gain traction. Indeed, it was decreasing over time. They thank everybody that supported the project, say they want to halt in the best possible way. Obviously, pretty sad thread to read, but I think it goes to show this whole crypto game. It's a tough game, and it can be a cruel mistress, especially in crypto winter. I hate to say it, but I think we're going to see a lot more of this in 2023 and maybe even into the first half of 2024. I think we're going to see a lot of projects that we were rooting for that may see the same kind of demise. Finally, let's end the week on some good news. It looks like ADA handle is closing in on 200,000 minted handles. This is a good sign for the size of the Cardano ecosystem expanding. Like, people have said it a million times, but I think it bears repeating. The rest of the crypto landscape is severely misunderstanding the gigantic size and strength of the Cardano ecosystem. I hope you're looking forward to a fantastic weekend, and I'll talk to you soon.